The title of today's talk is Breakthrough Creativity, an operating system for innovative and ideal problem solving. So we're going to spend the first little bit about talking about what exactly I mean by this. So in case this isn't what you're looking for.
This isn't beaches and beers?
No, this is the pre.
Great beaches and beers.
So I'd like to hear from you guys. When you think of creativity, I also use the word innovation in that title. What comes to you? What do those words mean for you? Because I'm going to define for you what I mean by them as I'm going into this. But creativity, innovation, what do those words mean to you?
For creativity, it would mean artistic drawing, graphics, but also finding solutions to problems.
Finding solutions to problems.
Yeah. So that'd be
Or the artistic kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Doing things in new ways, or joining. Well, for me, innovation is like joining existing concepts.
Cool, great. Anybody else?
Creation.
Yeah,
like creating new things. I guess creating anything is essentially creativity. Like boils down to it.
Cool. Anybody else? Creativity, innovation?
Something out of the box.
Out of the box.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So this is how I'm defining these terms for our use today. And it's in what you're saying, but just to be clear about what I mean. So how I'm defining creativity is turning new and imaginative ideas into reality. Creativity, the ability to perceive the world in new ways, to find hidden patterns, to make connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena, and to generate solutions. So, innovation is the implementation of a new or significantly improved product, service, or process that creates value. So the kinds of things I'm going to be talking about today can apply to any aspect of your life. But I'm going to share a little story with you that happened to do with my business. And since we're in this kind of environment, that's really kind of where I'm going to try to gear this a little bit to how to bring this kind of thinking into whatever you're doing professionally, but it applies anywhere in your life. And to me, creativity, in this way I'm talking about it, I like to throw in innovation because it's like, how do you take something, creativity can be something that stands in the realm of ideas. This is about how you actually make it happen. How do you make it real in your life? How do you make change? How do you bring it into the world, in your own life, in a way that actually gives you what you want? So this I just wanted to show because most of us tend to think about creativity in terms of left brain, right brain, this kind of artistic kind of thing, whereas the left brain is more thinking, planning, etc. That applies here, but the kind of creativity I want to talk about is how to make this all work together. How to bring our planning, dissecting, left brain so that it works in concert with this part of us that thinks outside of the box. So I use the word breakthrough, and I want to talk a little bit about this because I mean something kind of specific about that. So this is, again, creativity, the ability to perceive in new ways a situation, a problem, or challenge that allows a leap forward past even long-standing or seemingly impossible barriers, breakthrough, into innovative and ideal solutions, talk about that in a second, that get implemented and become problem gone in ways that you may not have been able to imagine before that. If anybody wants these, just come up to me afterwards. I'm happy to send you my slides too if you want these. So ideal, what I mean by ideal, and this is really for me a critical point in the kind of work I do, ideal is that it works for you. It works in the reality of your day-to-day problem. So ideal for you versus some kind of what's best in some way that isn't personal to you, but a breakthrough new way of approaching and solving a problem that works for the particulars of your life. So today what I want to do is we're going to do a little bit of a workshop. So I actually forgot to mention that. You have something to write on because we're going to go through and do a little bit of work on, or you're going to do for yourself a little bit of work on something in your life to make this more real.
Does it have to be on paper or on phone?
It can be on your phone. It's going to be, and it's not anything you're going to share with anybody. This is for you. So just something, because we're going to have some time to work through these steps. So we're going to begin transforming something in your life. The second one is really important for me to help, is to understand why, whatever you've been trying to do to solve whatever that problem is in your life, why it's not working. Because this is there's a lot of hidden stuff in here that for me, until I realized it, was like, oh my God. Because once you realize that there's things that are kind of built into us as human beings that get in our way in certain places, we tend to think there's something wrong with us. Like there's something wrong with me, but that's not true. And I'm going to teach you a simple method to create ideal resolutions that can be utilized in any area of your life. So a little bit about me. So my name is Daniel Piatek, and the kind of work that I do with people is, in essence, help them to bring thinking like this into whatever area of their life that they want to bring it. So how to take them from wherever they are to wherever they want to be, that allows for a tremendous amount of room to actually get to the place that is ideal for them versus the place that they think they want to go. You ever had that happen to you? Where you kind of go into something, and as you kind of go into it, you realize, no, that's not it. So this is quite a simple system I'm going to teach you, and I'm going to try to make it real for you by working on something. But if you embrace these tools, you end up in a place that maybe you didn't even know existed. But once you're there, it's like, holy hell, this is amazing. So the story I wanted to share with you is many, many years ago, it was my first trip to Bali. I was just telling these ladies, I came to Bali for the first time in 1994. And I've been here about 10 times since, and worked for a jewelry company in Ubud. It got me started in the jewelry business. Not anything I ever would imagine I'd do in my life. And after a couple of years, she sold her business, and I went to work for the new company. They didn't know anything about jewelry, and I was a sales guy. So my livelihood depending on being able to sell and fulfill orders of like thousands and thousands of pieces of jewelry. So it wasn't working, so I jumped ship, which meant I had to start my own business. So I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, but this was the first time I'd done it. Hard work, you guys know this, really hard work. Took me 4 years to build it up so that I could actually relax. You know, the bills were paid, the employees could be paid. At that point, it wasn't huge, but I had 4 employees and a bunch of jewelers that I hired per piece to make the jewelry. So at the time, and this gives you a little bit of insight into me, at the time I was also living in a spiritual community. I was basically a monk in the US, and because it was a non-traditional kind of a setup, we also had to make our own money. So yeah.
There's a big one.
Oh man. So I had to make my own money. So the business was doing well, but I also had a spiritual teacher. And because of the work I was doing in the community, which was basically starting a whole new project for our community, my teacher said, I need you to free yourself from that business because you're needed here. So I kind of freaked out because I had just gotten my business to the point after 4 years where I could kind of chill out and relax. I needed the money because that's how I earned my money. And somebody who was very important to me was telling me, I need you to not do that anymore. I freaked out. So it's like, how the hell do I deal with this? How do I get rid of my business, pay my bills, and do this other work, which was actually pretty cool, but wasn't going to pay the bills? How am I going to do this? So I thought, well, I know people in the business, so I'll try to sell my business. Nobody wanted it if I wasn't going to be running it. I thought, well, I'll just have to close it down then, but I had to pay my bills. So this went on for about 2 months. I literally had no idea how to get out of this. But in the world I was living in, I had to get rid of the business. So I remembered at that point a book that I had just read by a guy named D. Hock, who you guys have probably never heard of, right? So he is the man who invented Visa. He invented the credit card industry, the founder of Visa International. Pretty cool guy, actually. So he had written a book, and I remembered there was some quote in there, so I went to find the book. And the quote was something like this. It said, commit fully to the goal. Let go of any and every idea of how you're going to get there or what it's going to look like when you get there. And it was like the right thing at the right time because I had tried everything and it wasn't going to work, and so I just grabbed a hold of it and ran with it. So leaving out a lot of details between then and the end point, about 2.5 months later, literally about 2.5 months, after trying for months to sell it, I had the business sold, there was money in the bank, from that business. I had a salary for a year from this woman who bought the business, and all of my employees still had their job. So that was my first insight into, hold on a second, there's a different way to do this. Because I never could have imagined that would have happened, ever. So I want to teach you what I've learned over the years. It's a very simple way of approaching it, but it's profound. And it has to do with this idea of making a commitment to a goal and basically letting go of any idea of what it's going to look like or how you're going to get there. So for the next little bit while we're here, I'm going to ask some things of you which are literally impossible, but I'm going to ask you to play with me anyway. So set aside what you think you already know about what we're going to talk about. The things we're going to talk about today are not complicated, but there's power in approaching them freshly. Don't try to make sense of the things I'm going to say. That's left brain, right? So just stay with some play. Allow yourself to listen without making comparison, because that's left brain also. Don't worry about what you're going to do with any of this. I'm going to lead you through a process where you're going to work on something specific in your life so it roots it into something real. But just for now, just stay here and let's go on a journey together. Relax, be here, pay attention, and just listen, please. So there's one bit here I haven't talked about, which is operating system. And I want to clarify what I mean by that. Everybody knows what an operating system is, right? This is how a computer works. So the operating system, set of rules, instructions, and programming that determines how information is received, processed, and applied. What I'm going to suggest is we, in essence, have these same ideas in us that we're mostly unconscious of, we're mostly unaware of them. And these things that we're just doing because it's built into us are limiting what's possible. But it doesn't have to be that way. So like on a computer, in order to do anything on our computers, we need applications, right? The operating system in and of itself, for most of us, we can't do anything with it, but we have applications. It's how we get stuff done. So for us in our lives, applications are the ways that we approach, in this case, solving problems. There's ways in which we go about solving problems, and we're doing them all the time. There's ways that you have learned to approach solving problems. In many cases, it works, right? You're able to get stuff done and solve problems in your life. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong, but there are those things in each of our lives where we keep trying to do what we know to do, but it's not getting us to where we want. That's what today is going to address. So, what is our built-in operating system? I'm going to try to put some things, some names to what this is. These things that are happening us all the time that we may or may not realize, and may or may not realize that they limit hugely what's possible for us. The first is, there's a problem. So if you think about how we approach solving a problem, which in many cases works, there's a problem. Hone in on it, right? What is it? Got to figure it out. When we approach things in that way, we limit our view, we limit our scope, and we limit immediately what it is. By defining something as a problem, it's like versus what's going on, opportunity, it's opening. So this idea of there's a problem, you can feel in you it tightens up. So that's the first thing. Second is something that's built into how human beings operate, how we think. So any of you guys have been to any kind of storytelling stuff, or the idea of storytelling that's very popular these days? Past has led to the present, present leads to the future. It's how human beings, it's how our mind works. The issue with that, when we're trying to approach something in a brand new way to open up new opportunities, is without thinking about it, the way we're going to look is, there's a problem. How did I get here? Past to present, which is immediately already putting limitations on what's possible in the future. So again, none of this is inherently, none of it is inherently a problem. It's kind of like this is the software we got to work with. But once we realize this is what's going on, we can work around it. So this is basically a definition for the next point. The idea of intelligence. So intelligence you could define as the ability to get and use facts, information, and skills. We have all kinds of different kinds of intelligences, right? But somewhere around 90 to 95%, almost all, of our intelligence is non-conscious. You can also use the word unconscious. I just prefer to use this word. So 90 to 95% of our ability to get, use facts, information, and apply our skills is non-conscious. How do we approach solving a problem? We're using our conscious mind. So we're leaving out a great deal of what's built into us. Consciously, we can only process about 70 bits per second of information. Unconsciously, non-consciously, it's about 11 million. So that's 1 to 260,000. The idea here basically is we have a huge reservoir that is built into us that if we can figure out how to use it better, can actually give us brand new ways of approaching problems. The other is just about where we place our attention. So this is something that's talked about a lot these days because of phones, etc. Right? So where is our attention being placed as we're trying to deal with the difficulty of our life? It's also another factor. Anybody heard of confirmation bias? I'm hearing it a lot these days. So this is something that kind of lays behind this whole thing. And it's really, when I really learned about this, it was like, holy hell, no wonder it's so difficult. So because we're thinking past, present, and future, because we narrow things down by a problem, most of our intelligence isn't consciously available to us. Consciously, we're actually thinking very slowly, etc. The other thing that I actually didn't put on here is, I need to put that on here. So imagine right here in this room what you're able to perceive now through your 5 senses, right? I'm not talking about intuition, 6th sense, and I'm talking about your 5 physical senses. So because of the limitations neurologically and in our ability to process, we're only taking in about 2% of what's here, of what we can actually physically see, sense, and touch because of this difference in being able to process. So my whole point in all of this is we have access to a hell of a lot more than we're able to consciously access when we're trying to solve the problem. Now, solving the problem gets stuff done in certain ways, right? But those things in your life where you can't get beyond, we need something else. Confirmation bias, basically, the idea is our brain has to figure out, okay, I can't really deal with too much. I got way too much to deal with. How do I decide what to bring to the front for this person to use? Confirmation bias is the idea that the way that the mind sorts this is what it thinks is most relevant, which basically means what we already believe, where we're placing our attention. So if we're attending to problem, confirmation bias will tend to give us information related to problem, not information related to possibility. So everybody kind of follow me? My whole point is there's a whole lot available to us. But until we kind of realize that and we have to do it differently, we can't access it except for rare moments where it kind of comes through. So the box. So the thing is, I'm hoping, because we all talk about the box, right, getting out of the box, but what I was trying to present in all those figures is that the box is way bigger than we think it is. It's way thicker. Like, there's so much available to us outside that box, so much, but we can get to it. We need a new operating system, because all of that stuff is what is running the show until we decide we want to do it differently. So I call this new operating system the genius keys. Why do I call it that? So there's a phrase that I use that people talk about genius a lot. I mean it in a very specific way, which is I believe we all have what I call a unique genius. It's what is kind of inherently built into us. It's the way that we see things. It's what's built into us to give to the world. It's what, without all of that stuff before, it's what can come through that's ours, that's uniquely here to give. It's our way of seeing things, it's our way of solving problems. So these are the keys to access that part of us that's already there without having to go through all that limitation. It only has 3 rules. I call them the genius keys. We're going to practice them today in relationship to a problem that you have for yourself. They open up the world beyond that box. And the idea is it's practicing getting outside of all of that imposed limitation that comes with our basically built-in operating system. So, got a new operating system, but we still need application to run it. You guys heard of intentions, the idea of intentions? So the idea here is, let me just go through these real quick. So the intentions are our applications. It's consciously choosing what we want to create. They literally are a creation. It's a focus on the outcome, problem solved, rather than focus on the problem. It's a focus on problem solved rather than how am I going to get there. So our tendency is to focus on problem and process the how we're going to get there. And it gets out of this past, present, and future. So the idea with an intention is, let me see, where am I at here? Yeah. So I'm going to ask you, so this is the work for you to do for yourself. I'm going to lead you through this. You're not going to share any of this, so don't worry about having to share it. So I'm going to ask you to choose something in your life that you'd like to work on. And we're going to work on this as I teach you these 3 keys that I haven't spoken about yet. So think about, does everybody have something to work on? Ideally, doesn't have to be, ideally it's something that you've been kind of trying to get past or something you've been trying to create. It can be personal, it can be professional, it can be being a different way in life, it could be creating a new product, it can be anything. It really doesn't. But if you have something you've been trying to kind of fix, solve, create for a little while, that's even better. Everybody have something? Something? So the idea is setting an intention, and I'm going to ask you to write something here, is an intention basically is think about that situation in your life. Now, imagine that you have that something has happened over some amount of time, and that situation is no longer a problem. It's gone, and not because you're ignoring it, but it's actually you've found a resolution to it. What does that look like? What does that resolution look like? So, it's not focusing on how I get problem to something else. It's not at all worried about how it's going to happen. But once you don't have to worry about that thing anymore, what does that look like? So, if it's a new product, I've got the new product in place that's geared towards such and such. It's selling at X amount, whatever. Just something so that it's literally nothing in the way that you state that is having anything to do with getting over a problem. It's literally, this is what I want. And this can actually be really hard, particularly with stuff we've been working on for a while, because it's just lived as a problem for so long. It's hard to even imagine what it might look like to not have it there anymore. And we'll take a couple minutes, and if anybody has any questions or wants some assistance, speak up, please. Let's give like another minute or so. And if anybody wants any help, please feel free to speak up. And so you don't need to worry about getting all the details down. Because sometimes things live for us like I'm really clear what I want, and you can write a lot of details, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with it. But other times it's kind of like you just don't really know, and that's okay too. But you want to kind of get the essence of what that would look like. So in the example I had about like a new product, like maybe you're not even sure what it is or but it's just like the outcome would be I am thrilled with the product that I've created. It could be as simple as that, but it's literally you're beyond any idea of having to get somewhere to solve a problem. If there's detail, that's good, but it's not necessary here. And so this is something that we're going to get into the three keys here in a second. But this is something, so again, this is just one thing in your life. You can do this to other things. But this is something to start, in essence, programming that confirmation bias to start serving you. This is something to kind of put somewhere and keep reminding yourself. This is the game I'm playing. This is one of the games I'm playing in my life. Because it's a way to tell that mechanism, show me information that relates to this picture, rather than show me information that relates to this freaking problem that's driving me crazy. So, now, you have that intention. That's the application, right? So now we're going to, in essence, run it on that operating system. And this is the 3 steps. And again, they're not complex. They're very simple. And I'm going to ask you just to approach it with a fresh mind, because these can really change how you approach stuff. So the first key is, I don't know. You could also restate it as, I don't already know. So what don't you already know? What exactly the problem is. You don't know what caused it. You don't know what's going to solve it. You don't know how to get there, for starters. And then all the details underneath it. The idea here is, because of past, present, future thinking, it's so built into us. When we approach something, even you just restated it differently, but we're going to tend to approach it like, I know where it came from, I know exactly what the problem is, I know why it's a problem. So have you ever had an aha moment where something is all of a sudden like, oh my God, right? So what I would suggest is the aha moments come from a moment when you actually drop for a second that you know something, and you're willing to see it differently. You're willing to see it from a different perspective. So sometimes, if this is the thing I'm working on, in essence, all I need to do is come over here and look at it. So the idea with this is you just start to practice taking a relationship to that intention you just created of, I don't really know what this is, I don't exactly know how to get there. Because everything that you already know, all the skills, the talents, the information you have that can serve it, dude who's telling you this, maybe there's something to what he's saying. Practice a little bit, you'll start to see for yourself. But it's like, maybe there is something to this, right? And part of it is that it's okay, because I'm basically telling you in this process that where you want to start, the place to start is, I don't know. I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue how to deal with this. So for most of us, and the way we've been taught and what lives for us emotionally is, when we have a problem, particularly something that's important to us, and we don't know what to do, it's freak out, right? Because everybody's asking, you think you should know, and what I'm saying is, no, actually, the place to start is, I don't already know. Everybody kind of with me so far?
So is this a practical step that we can do right now, or it's just saying,
We're going to do that. We're going to do something right now. So the thing is about this is that, because usually when I teach this, I do it in a course, and so we talk about some stuff, get people's intention setting, and then they go off for a week, and they work on it. So which means you actually practice it out in the real world. So what I came up with for something like this is something we're going to do now, which kind of flips this on its head, and I'll explain it in a minute. Because maybe something comes to you in the moment, right? If you kind of say, hold on a second, if I just step back, maybe something actually does come to you about that right now. If it does, write it down. I'm going to do something a little different, because what I found is that needs a little bit of time typically for things to start opening up. So we're going to do something a little different. So the exercise to approach this is to start to become more aware of all the things that we do already know about it. Because what I'm suggesting is there's a habitual way of being with this stuff. It's built into us of just knowing so much about something. And we don't realize how much we're just imposing into that space. So we're going to take a couple minutes and I'm going to ask you to look at that intention that you just set. That difficulty in your life that you're now creating new. And just think about the things, and this may take a minute because this is operating unconsciously. So I'm trying to make something that's not conscious. All the things that you already know about that situation. So think about it. How did I get there? Think about all the things you've tried to make it go away. Those are the things. Start writing those down, because what I found is if you start realizing, holy hell, there's actually something to this. There's so, I'm even though I might try to, I'm not bringing a clear slate to these things. So just take a couple minutes and think through that and write them down. Just begin writing, because it opens up that world of the kinds of things that when you're trying to come at this not knowing, get some idea of what are the things you need to kind of just push aside for a little bit as you're approaching things freshly. Does that make sense to everybody? Some of those things can be also, I'm not the person that can. I need to be different. Some version of it's not possible because. These kinds of things. And again, what I'm suggesting is none of those need to change. They just need to be interrupted.
What happens if you're not sure about these? I already know.
Don't worry about it. It's the idea with this exercise is just to start opening up something that we don't think about.
Yeah.
And just so you can kind of get a sense of, because I'm suggesting, and I don't know, that there's a whole thing. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm kind of asking the impossible. When you start to play with this, it becomes more clear. To push aside things that you actually don't really know are happening in the first place. But when you start looking, it starts to kind of, oh wow. Actually, this is another way. Think about a conversation you have with a friend. And he or she is like running into something, it's always the same old thing, and it's so clear to you what's going on, right? You ever had this happen? And they're not clear at all, or they can't find their way through it, and you can see it more clearly. It's that kind of clarity you want to bring to yourself. It's like, okay, let's just look at this, and it's really important. I'm going to say this once again. It's really important because what I'm suggesting is none of these things are problems. The fact that I don't believe I can do it, none of those are problems. It's just to see them, because once you see them, then just like those little annoying kids, if you ever had kids, you learn to tune them out. You learn to tune them out, but you have to see them first. Okay, I'm going to move on. But this next week, as you're going through this, if you really kind of play with that intention a little bit, kind of keep it in your mind, what I'm saying will actually, you can, now that I'm saying this, you're going to start seeing some of what I'm talking about. And all you have to do is just interrupt, say, hold on a second, what if I just take a minute and try to not know anything about this? Make it fun, play with it, and see what comes up. You're actually, in essence, sort of creating your own aha moment. So genius key number 2 is kind of obviously so in a way I want to know. So the idea here is you're bringing curiosity and wonder, openness, rather than I've got to solve a problem. I want to know what? I want to know how to get to that intention I just wrote for myself. I want to know how to get to that place. Curiosity and wonder. You begin to start paying attention to what? to looking for, in your own experience, for the next right step to show up. So, how does this show up? It shows up with little aha moments inside. It shows up in ways where you find yourself being interested in something and maybe you're not sure why you're interested in it. And I'm going to talk about kind of what to do with that in the next step. But you're paying attention to the fact, and actually at first allowing yourself to trust that, hey, if I stop and interrupt that process of knowing about this thing and just open up to I don't know, but I actually do want to solve this problem, so I do want to know, you're training your attention towards resolution. And so remember that huge wellspring of intelligence and information I talked about before? You suddenly have access to that. And you're training through confirmation bias, you're training for your brain to give you the information related to solving that problem. Everybody follow me a little bit? So this is also really key, and it kind of like doesn't make sense, and once you kind of play with this, it'll make sense, is that the statement is our questions are the answer. The questions are, I wonder what's next for me. I'm curious about what's actually going on here. Engage in those questions. The idea of curiosity and wonder in this is really important. Think of a little child who's trying to explore something new. This is really contrary to the way most of us solve most problems. And it's not that the other way is wrong, because that works in many cases. But this is a way to get to where you're not able to find resolution. And you're putting confirmation bias in service of your intention. So now the exercise here is start writing some questions for yourself about that intention. If you were to bring a sense of curiosity and wonder about having that intention you wrote, just like without knowing anything about it. This is challenging for us. Little kid, this kind of stuff comes to little kids easier. It's like, but like, what are some of the questions? Like, I wonder what that would look like. I wonder what it would take. I wonder, it could be anything. It doesn't really matter. But the idea here is just start writing some questions for yourself. And this is a great way to start. They don't have to start with I wonder, but it's a good way to start. As you're doing this, and this is, because I didn't say this at the beginning, but so part of what you're doing here, in essence, is sort of, everybody started mindfulness these days, right? So, in essence, some of what I'm talking about is kind of mindfulness in essence. It's becoming more aware of things that are just happening all the time. So, as you're doing this now, because I'm asking you to do something that's not familiar to most of us, it's not the way we usually approach something. So, just take a couple minutes to write some questions that kind of poke into this. And as you're doing it, just notice what's happening for you inside. Is this exciting? Does it feel fearful? Is it like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing or what this guy's talking about? Just notice it. Because all of this, it frees us up. It's like the more we see about what's going on, the more these things aren't just taking over. So, and the idea with this second step is to open us up to seeing what's the next thing for me to do towards getting to that final resolution. And this is really important. As you go off and try to practice this, what you're looking for is the next right step. And this is also something most of us are looking for problem solved. And problem solved is going to take 50 steps. It's this is something I have to remind myself of all the time. It's like, chill out, dude, step at a time. So, If anybody feels stuck, feel free to just, because we can dive in a little bit if you'd like. So this practice is a practice that it's can be talked about in different ways from different points of view. So it opens us up to synchronicities. It opens us up to seeing things that we wouldn't normally see. So remember, in this room, we're only consciously processing 2% of what literally our physical eyes and ears can actually gather. So we need to do something to open ourselves up to that. And so all of this is about opening us up to pulling in the information that's going to support what we want. And when we try to solve a problem, basically what happens is we tend to get more information about the problem and why it's there. Not necessarily helpful. Okay, I'm going to move on to genius key number 3. So genius key number 3 is I'm willing to act. I'm willing to act on what I discover. So, a couple things here. So, on one, it's pretty obvious that if we don't act, if we don't do something different, things aren't going to change. So that's number 1. So if you embrace the first 2 keys and start practicing them, there are going to be things that show up that are like kind of draw you in a particular direction, or you feel like, oh, that's interesting, I should try that. Or somebody comes out of nowhere. I mean, this has happened to me a lot. I've been in Uber now for a month, and my whole time has been people showing up. It's like, oh wow. And if you're looking for that, you'll sense there's an opportunity here, there's something that can support me in this. And then, but if you don't act on it, nothing happens. So that's pretty obvious. However, the kinds of things that can show up in this space are things that you weren't expecting necessarily, or they're things that feel threatening or scary. So the idea in the third key is to start cultivating a willingness to respond when it's not obvious that this is actually going to help, for instance. Sometimes it's real obvious. Oh wow, I never thought of that. That's amazing. Let's do that. No problem. You still got to act, but it makes sense. Your mind can grasp it. It fits into your idea of yourself and the situation. But the idea we're talking about breakthroughs here. And breakthrough comes because something that we didn't see, couldn't imagine comes in out of left field. And oftentimes, they just don't make sense to us. It's frightening, etc. So we got to practice responding. We got to practice responding when things come up. So the idea here is, I don't know, breaks the cycle of the old operating system, right? You got to that's in essence the practice here, because that's where you interrupt it. Let me go here for a second. So these 3 work together. I don't know, I want to know, I'm willing to act. So this is all around the particular, we're dealing with one intention. We all have many parts of our lives. We're only dealing with one right now. The system is the same, but it's around making that happen for you. Where you interrupt is here. This is what we can control, really, in a big way. Stop, I'm freaking out, I feel stuck. Let's just practice not knowing. So, being willing to act means daring to take a chance on something that may not be clear to you how it's going to help you. So has anybody ever had that happen in life? I mean, imagine things in your life. Think back a little bit. How you ended up someplace, or a situation, or a circumstance, or a relationship, or something, and it was just the weirdest path to get there. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we're opening us up to, is where breakthrough means couldn't see it, couldn't imagine it necessarily. So we got to be willing to act on things that don't necessarily make sense to our mind, but feel right. So, the exercise for this is to do some thinking for yourself. And just to bring up to mind, because it's about cultivating willingness here. What would you need for yourself? What would it take for you to act without being certain of an outcome? It's a really kind of challenging question to ask. But like, what would you need if you're not sure that I'm going to do this because it feels like this will get me there even though I'm not sure why. What's it going to take for you to actually take that step? What do you need?
Like a solution step or?
It would be, oftentimes what it is like, I know for myself, is that, because like depending on what you're talking about here, like can you imagine you getting to that intention is going to be like many steps?
Okay.
So then what you're looking for is that next step. And the way I say is next right step. How do you know it's right? You don't. But when you practice this, you start to sense, you start to feel. And that's why this third key is important, because, it's just to be willing to act. Like something stupid the other day, it was like somebody came into my life from somewhere and I thought, you know what, maybe this guy's got a thing. So I just, let's have a coffee. It's not clear to me at all why that had anything to do with affecting the rest of my life at all. So what did I lose out on? An hour of time. Right? So it's like, this is why it's like this question of what would you need, because some of these things are obvious. Think about it, where somebody comes into your life and like, oh wow, oh cool, come on, let's talk, right? It connects and you can kind of get it. But there are other times when it's like, think about this, we've all had these, where it's just like, I don't know why, but I need to do this, right? This person, yeah.
So in your example with the person you met for coffee, what did you need then to just decide to go for coffee with them?
Well, the first thing was it was one of those weird circumstances. It's a guy who I had just seen because of like a friend, something on Facebook, a video he had done. It was interesting kind of stuff. And I just happened to see, oh my God, this guy's coming to Bali. And I'm thinking, well, this is kind of weird. He lives in Hong Kong. I'm in Bali. Maybe there's something here. And I liked what he had to say. It was interesting to me personally, the kind of stuff. So I thought, let me just raise. I wrote him. I met him and his wife. We had a great time. It was cool. But it's not clear to me at all where, you know what I mean? But there's another one yesterday. It was completely the opposite. Like phenomenal. I had the same kind of circumstance, and I followed up with this guy, and I actually kept pushing it. And we met, and anyways, we're actually going to be coaching each other, and this guy's fucking amazing. I'm thrilled that this man's going to be coaching me, and he's really thrilled that I'm going to be working with him. So that's what I mean. It's not always going to kind of pay off to take those little steps, but it's like life is not asking us, and I'm not asking you to take some huge leap into the unknown, right? I'm not asking you to pack your bags and move across the world. Although that's how I got to Bali this time. So when I got the message, I did not want to come. I did not want to come. I have a lot of history here, and it wasn't really there's a lot of history here. It was like, I don't really want to go there. But I kept pursuing it, and it became really clear to me, I need to be here. And the second day I was here, I didn't literally do this, but metaphorically I got to kiss the ground. It's like, thank God, this is exactly what I needed. I literally had no idea about that until I got here. But I kept going. It's like, no, there's something here. I have to follow this up. And I just kept getting the sense, no, I need to go. So that's what I mean. It's like, and it really is a question of, this is why it's like, it's cultivating willingness to act. Because this key is not act on anything that comes up. This key is actually practicing a willingness to just take a little risk.
So it would have been like you were interested in what these people were doing, and that's enough for you to go a bit further. Because
it may not be clear to you at all why that's the case. Or even that I wish I could think of this example of something recently, where I acted on something, but something totally else came out of it. Something completely I couldn't have imagined out of this person was going to come out of that. So it's that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this kind of thing you can talk about from a spiritual point of view too. It's like, and that's kind of the world I play in, but it doesn't have to be. It's just there's parts of us that know what's right for us that our brain doesn't necessarily. So you could speak about that, about being willing to actually just trust the fact that this looks interesting to me, I have no idea why. So I'm going to move on, but the exercise here was basically just think about what would it take. Just think about a time when something where it's the idea of you know this, where you've done something you didn't necessarily know why, but it was like there was some kind of something that came out of it that you couldn't have expected. And so what I'm saying in this third key is to keep leaning into that willingness, because that's what pays, that's what makes the payoff here. Because we can practice not knowing, I don't know, open up, lean into curiosity and wonder in key 2. Information, ideas might come to us, but if you don't do anything about it, nothing changes, right? So think about, on a real practical level, all the ideas you have about your business that don't get enacted, for instance, right? Not all of them are good, not all of them should have been. But the idea of action here is important, but I'm suggesting a kind of action that may not make sense rationally, and cultivating a willingness to just give it a try. Okay if I move on? So I went through this already. So the idea here is that it's something to keep practicing. It's something to keep practicing because, and the way to do this, particularly at first, this is something that it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's there all the time for me because I find myself getting stuck a lot. But as you're just practicing it, the way to start is focusing on I don't know. And when to do it is when something like the situation you're working on comes up and you feel the pain of it. That's when you're going to think about it. Watch. Hold it. What did that guy say? I don't know. You interrupt here. Lean into I want to know. Something that calls your attention, act on it. It brings you into a new place. Come back to I don't know. So it's something at first you have to really kind of work. And as you do it, it actually becomes more and more part of just how you're approaching things. So that's the new operating system for breakthrough creativity and ideal solutions. Ideal solutions because, as I said, and the reason why I call it genius keys is that genius, that kind of you that's more you than you know yourself to be. I never said that before, but the you that's more you than you know yourself to be. It's been my experience in life. So I'm living the kind of life, doing the kind of work that I'm doing. I literally couldn't have planned it. Literally. But it fits me more than I love my life. I've got problems. It's like I've got a human life, but I love it, and I couldn't have planned it. That's what I love about this, is because you're tapping into a part of you that actually, in a certain way, knows more than our conscious mind often does about this. So, what's next? So I gave this talk up at Ubud, which is where I've been working a couple days ago. And my unique genius, as I was putting this together, was telling me I need to do something to support people to practice this. So I have to shoot these videos yet, but I'm going to be making, the idea is like a 5-day challenge, 5 videos that's going to go, the structure of it will be day 1, focus on intention, 2, 3, and 4, the 3 keys, and I'm not sure what 5 is yet. Basically to support you actually going out there to practice. So I'm hoping to get that started early next week. So if that's something you'd like, you just have to give me your email address. I won't use it anything other than for this. I'll probably invite you at that point to be on my mailing list if you want. But the point of this is to support you, because I usually teach this inside a class where people go off, they come back and we talk about that key, they move on. But the way this comes to life is actually getting out and doing it. And kind of like, oh wow, okay, maybe kind of. And if you have any questions, so I don't work at a dojo, I'm up at Ubud, so if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to talk about this stuff. This is kind of cool for me, so I'll give you my email address if you'd like. So I think I need to finish, but so the rest of that story, when I got that business sold and I moved on, is that is basically, it really changed the way I saw things. And I had been, at that point, I was living in a spiritual, I was a monk at that point for about 8 years. I was celibate, and I meditated 2 to 3 hours a day. So there was a way in which I kind of understood the mind in a way which was quite profound. That's a gift about having a practice like that. But it's that trusting and knowing that you can find your way, like putting meditation into practice. It's kind of how I see these keys. And you don't need to sit and meditate for 3 hours a day to do this. It's actually pretty simple, but you got to interrupt the old operating system so that something new can come through. So I ended up leaving that life not that long after that. And I've had about 3 different lifetimes since then. So my life has been the kind of life that kind of reinvents itself. And what I've learned over the years is that this is a way to do it. In terms of really having something in your life not just be a continuation of the way it's been. So I invite you to play and really approach it from a playful point of view, because that's where you access tremendous genius. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time. So this is my website, my email address, and I'm happy to take questions if we have a little time.
Yeah, sure. Do you guys have questions?
And if anybody wants those slides, you can just let me know. So if you want me to send out for the 5-day challenge, if you could just write down I'll get a piece of paper, you can write down your email address. And feel free to email me. But anybody have any questions about kind of what you worked on today or anything we talked about?
More personal question. So, are you still meditating now, for example, or have you ever regretted that you sold out the business?
No, there was without going into all the details, because it's like my world changed a lot pretty quickly thereafter in ways that I didn't foresee at all. And in looking back in retrospect, if I still had that business as I was trying to make those changes, I couldn't have done it. I literally couldn't have done it. So I ended up leaving. I mean, I was basically a celibate monk for the decade of my 30s. The decade of my 40s was basically being married and having 2 stepkids in the suburbs of New York City. So I never imagined that. So it's that kind of thing where that part of you that really is, I come from a spiritual point of view in this stuff, but it doesn't have to be. But I feel like there's a truer life that's always trying to live itself through us, a more authentic life trying to live itself through us. This is it. It's kind of a boiled down way to actually access that in a way that's practical. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Questions?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I just wondered if you actually ever do any of these exercises in combination with meditation techniques or anything like that to help you do the thinking with them.
Sometimes in the course, I'll do it in where, I'll give a guided meditation in essence. And so, because the courses that I've taught them up until now, at least, I'm actually kind of shifting in maybe how I bring this into a not so spiritual context without losing it. But in the ways I've been doing it, I've been very profoundly spiritual. So it's like, let's connect to your guides. Let's connect, however you want to see it, let's connect to something that you would consider a wiser part of you. And create that kind of dialogue. And so it's stuff like that where to me, it almost doesn't matter what you believe. It really, but if you can allow yourself to believe in more than what you got, it accesses the imaginative capacity in us. So to me, that's the human capacity to extend beyond our limitation, is that imagination. So to me, when you say meditation, it's not so much stillness, quieting the mind kind of stuff. It's not that kind. It's about accessing imagination in that kind of way. So yes.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
We kind of have the same question.
Uh-huh.
I was just asking, in what way meditation helped you in your life?
So back then, because the way that my teacher taught meditation was basically the instructions were simple. Sit for an hour, don't move, period.
And that was helpful for you?
it's amazingly helpful if you have somebody that's kind of working with you because my experience and many people's experience is that for an hour you'll have periods where it feels good, where it's kind of good. But mostly you'll sit there feeling like you're doing it wrong. Because there's all these ideas of what it should be and what it's supposed to look like, and I'm not doing it, and da 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 da. So the idea that he taught, because meditation is taught in many different ways, and they're all kind of, to me, they're not all the same. They have different goals, and they're just different. This was about, in essence, finding a way to have no relationship with the movement of mind and emotion. So to be this neutral observer. And it's kind of an impossible thing to do, but it's something you can practice. And it's a way to not be so, and when you're in your life, not be so swayed by the craziness of the mind or the fact that emotions are really difficult to deal with at times, right? So in that way, there's a sense of distance from something that feels so close. And it's something I don't teach, but it's really interesting because it's coming up, because I had a guy yesterday from the thing say, "You ever teach the meditations?" Because there is something, the thing is, and it really is true, these steps cultivate that kind of experience. Sitting and meditating is profound because you're just not doing anything else but that, even if it's 10 minutes. But
do you still meditate until now?
no, I'll do it, not in that way, I'll do it in the way I was just talking to Bobby about. Is, for me, it's a way to, well, no, actually I do that sometimes, but not as a practice, no, I don't. And I got over a long time ago giving myself a hard time for that, because I just realized, no, it's okay, I don't need to do that, for whatever, I don't need to do that right now. But this I find very profound, accessing that imaginative capacity. It's interesting because the work and the way I approach spiritual work for me has become much more practical about how do you apply it into life. And kind of looking as an observer of spirituality, because I've been doing this for 35 years now, this kind of stuff, pretty much most of my life, is that things are shifting in the world. And the way people are approaching things like spirituality is much more about being in the world than it was 20, 30 years ago, let alone beyond that, which was really getting away from the world. You had to get away from the world to have objectivity. And now it's more like, how do I have objectivity while I'm dealing with stuff?
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time and attention, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. I'll get a piece of paper up here if you would like to be a part of that 5